Hello, ladies and gentlemen, once again. My name is The Advocate, and today we are advocates for A Knight of the Seven Kingdoms spoiler talk. And today I've got my good friend, the Grease Goblins, on here with me. Grease, what's up? What you got going on?
Not too much. I'm excited that we finally get to talk about spoilers, okay? Because the last collab we did, it was one of those where it was like we had to watch what we were saying. It was a no spoilers type of episode. But now we get to talk about the nitty gritty. I'm excited. Been doing a lot of, work with the reread and just some Fire and Blood stuff, which I've enjoyed, especially, the Magor the Cruel Era of Fire and Blood. But yeah,
Oh,
excited
dude.
to talk a Knight of the Seven Kingdoms.
Yeah, the greatest Targaryen there, Maegor the Cruel.
Gulp.
Yeah, so as Grease has mentioned, we've previously talked about The Knight of the Seven Kingdoms quite a couple of times, but we were kind of straining to talk about some of the real stuff we wanted to talk about, the juicy spoiler stuff. So this is our opportunity to just go into the nitty gritty, just get those spoilers out there. So if you, my friend, ladies and gentlemen, have not read the Knight of the Seven Kingdoms novella compilation, and more specifically the Hedge Knight novella within that compilation, then I highly urge you to read that before watching this video. But if you don't care about spoilers, then stick around. So, Grease, with all that, are you excited for A Knight of the Seven Kingdoms Season 1?
Yeah, I'm excited to see what they do with it. It is one of the best written pieces George has made. I don't have it like as my favorite book or anything, just because it is so short. But
Right.
the first novella is my favorite of the three. So I of all the seasons, this is the one I'm looking forward to like the most. I do think it's also probably the easiest to adapt of the three books or the three novellas, I should say. Maybe the third, but I would say the first one's like the easiest one for me, and so I am cautiously, like optimistic for it. I do still have my reservations. A lot of that is due to House of the Dragons, season two and the show as a whole, the direction of where it seems to be going. I don't know if that's going to trickle into A Night of the Seven Kingdoms or we're going to have a classic. The first season of the show is going to be great. And then from there, it's going to kind of decline. But yeah, I'm excited to see, specifically because what we're going to talk about in spoilers in this video, what added stuff they're gonna do. What is the extra content they're gonna put in there that can pad out the runtime?
Yeah, no, I completely agree with you on all those points. I too am very cautiously optimistic. Like, I'm still looking forward to it. And like yourself, I think The Hedge Knight is albeit short, but a beautiful piece of work. I think it's some of George R.R. Martin's, not his finest, but one of his finest pieces of fiction that I've read from him within this world. So I'm pretty excited about that. Um, like you, after House of the Dragon season 2, my excitement for anything with regards to televised adaptations of his work, I'm a little bit hesitant to get hyped. I am cautiously optimistic. I'm interested, but I'm not as interested in it as if I would have been coming into House of the Dragon season 1 when we still had some excitement for this A Song of Ice and Fire world. So with that, Grease, I think it's time to just rip that band-aid off. Like, spoilers, what exactly do you think they're going to do with this first season? We kind of discussed a little bit in your collaboration that we were a little worried as to how this 1 hour and 45-minute audiobook or this, 110-page novella would be able to be spread out to encompass 6 individual 1-hour episodes, so 6 hours of total runtime. And we speculated they could do flashbacks or other things, but what do you think, Grease, could be done here with this first season to get it to be 6 hours long?
So they're really gonna have to pad out some things. They're gonna have to add a lot of scenes in there, especially if they're all gonna be 1 hour. I don't know if we've had that confirmed yet. I know that at least the premiere is allegedly gonna be an hour, which makes sense. But I mean, you just think about the source material. It's like 100 pages. It's not very long at all. And also, I mean, my Night of the Seven Kingdoms, book, the pages have pictures on them a lot of times, so you're not even getting full pages. It's really short. Like you can read the novellas, like almost each one of them. I'd say the first one for me, the easiest because it's my favorite.
Yeah.
You can easily get through that in like an afternoon or two. And so how do you then go from that to 6 episodes, with 6 hours worth of content when I believe Night of the Seven Kingdoms could have easily been a movie. So
Yeah.
they're gonna have to add probably flashbacks of Sir Arlen, the knight that Dunk is squiring under. Really, I would say right before the beginning of the novella starts. I think there will be extra stuff there. I think they'll explore more of Dunk's origin. I think they're going to expand out the characters that are involved. So the Targaryens, the main ones that we have being, Egg, Aerion, Daron, Maekar, Baelor, Valar. Those are the main Targaryens for this story, specifically in the first season. I think we're going to get a lot more of those. I think we're going to get a lot more of the, more minor characters that were off the book page that we didn't get to see their perspectives or anything like that. They're just gonna have to expand the story because as the story stands right now, there isn't enough time or there sorry, there's not enough, like, pages for that to expand to 6 episodes. So they'll have to do what Game of Thrones season 1 kind of did, where you add in scenes that you could have seen happening, but didn't happen in the book. So
Right.
Robert and Cersei conversations, Jaime conversations with Barristan and Robert.
Yeah. And this is kind of something I want to talk with the viewers about. So, a lot of people have kind of this stereotype about people who are book readers when they watch something adapted from the book that, like, oh, book readers just want something that's, a one-to-one exact recreation of everything that happened in the book. And that's not necessarily true. Like, I mean, obviously, we want something that's faithful to the source material, but I think what we're more concerned with is that it's faithful to the themes and the things that it adds kind of keep that same thematic semblance, that they it kind of makes sense within the logic of the story they're trying to tell within the televised product, even if, that might change a couple of things from the book. We don't care, as much about changes. We just care, does it make sense? Is it good? Does it kind of match what the book was going for in terms of tone and theme? And so, like you said, if they added more scenes with Maekar Targaryen, with Baelor Breakspear, with Aerion Brightflame, with some of these other characters that we kind of do get a bit of a grasp in with the Hedge Knight novella, but the television show is a perfectly great opportunity to expand on those characters. If they add to those characters whilst it's still making sense for the TV show, then I think that's awesome. Like I'm all for that. Like just as you said, with season 1 when they added all these miscellaneous scenes with King Robert and Cersei, and even scenes with Varys and Littlefinger, those still made sense within that context of the first season. So I think, as long as they add something that contributes to the narrative without kind of being like something that like, oh, that was random and weird and it didn't make sense, even if it's different from the book, I think I'd be okay with that.
I agree. I do want to point out one thing because I do see this comment brought up a good amount, even in like live streams with like me and Ricky sometimes,
Yeah.
or just in comments on videos like this. I want you guys to remember, again, I think both me and you are fairly positive of House of the Dragon season 1.
Yeah.
One of the things that I praised in season 1, I don't praise it now, but I praised it in season 1, was I actually did like the change of taking Alice and Rhaenyra's relationship to being very different than Fire and Blood, where it's more of a stepmother, and Allison who's older than Rhaenyra, and they took it and they made it okay. These two characters, they're about the same age. It's more like they're kind of best friends, and then you see that kind of tragic destruction of that through a lot of different reasons. I liked for what that did for season 1. It made that conflict feel a lot more like interesting than it did in the book, I think. And so again, that was a change that was not straight from Fire and Blood. It was quite the opposite from Fire and Blood. I really like that change. Now season 2 kind of screwed up that change in my opinion and made it now that I don't like that change. But again, just when the show was airing, I liked that change. And so again, as long as in a Knight of Seven Kingdoms and adaptations, just in general, you're making changes that help the story come to life on screen or make sense with the story that the show or a movie is trying to tell. Lord of the Rings, I think, is the best example. Lord of the Rings takes liberties in the movies with Peter Jackson from the books, and people that are book fans and movie fans, they love both. I am one of those people. So I think that some people just don't understand that you can like something even though you like the adaptation or you've read the adaptation before and all of that.
Yeah, for sure. I mean, there's multiple examples, especially, even within the first Game of Thrones season. As we talked about, there's additions, but there's also changes within that first season of Game of Thrones, which is, the most faithful season to the source material, where you're like, wow, this change it not only adds to the narrative, but it enhances the story. It's like, wow, this is actually, not to say that it was better, but it emphasizes some elements more than what George R. R. Martin was going for in that book.
It
And
was a different take.
yeah, it was a different take, but a different take that added to the story that was presented to you on television. So, you know, we're not against changes, we're not against any of these things. What we desire, and even if you asked a casual fan who didn't read the books, I imagine what they desire as well is for something on screen that makes sense and that makes them feel something. And unfortunately, most of the times where there's a disconnect between the viewer and what the producers are putting on screen, a lot of those, disconnects come from changes that were made that didn't make sense for the television product they were trying to put on. So, yeah, I mean, Grease, you and I are not against changes. We just want good changes.
Yes, yes, agreed. I mean, even your Game of Thrones point, like think about the way that Catelyn is, I would say, shown in the show versus the book.
Oh,
Catelyn is
yeah.
much more likable in the show,
Oh, for
especially in
sure.
season one. They change very minor things that have very huge like views of how you view the character. So, for instance, Catelyn in the book is the one that pushes Ned to go to King's Landing, right?
Right.
In the show, it's the complete opposite, right? It's Catelyn not wanting him to do that. And so that changes a lot of your opinion about Catelyn book to show. My theory is that was done to make the Red Wedding more tragic because more people will like Catelyn than in the book. So it's things like that that's like I don't think that's a bad change at all. I think that that actually does add something. I can see why they did that.
Yeah. Yeah, for sure. So I think to your point, Grease, are you confident that the changes and or additions that the producers are going to make with this first season of A Night of the Seven Kingdoms are going to be more positive when it comes to adapting the Hedge Knight novella? Or do you still have kind of hesitations that they might add kind of random White Walker cameos and, you know, things that maybe don't make sense?
I mean, it's the thing I'm the most worried about is the added scenes
Yeah.
because it's not something that George R. R. Martin has written. They're going to make up the dialogue for whatever scenes they're adding. They're going to make up whatever these scenes have to do. And if you even wanna look at House of the Dragon season 1, they weren't perfect at that at all. They had times where that didn't work. It was just a lot of the times in season 1, the good outweighed some of the bad that happened, and the bad was usually not much of the screen time. It was usually like the very end of episodes. And so when you have people like Ryan Condal, who is also involved in A Night of the Seven Kingdoms, he's the main person behind House of the Dragon, it does worry me that they're going to have to make sure that they're not taking away from the story. The White Walker thing, I can see maybe why they threw that into the dance because that's a major world changing event that if you want to tie that into Aegon's dream and all that stuff, that's fine. I still don't think you should. I think it takes away from the dance, but whatever. The Night of the Seven Kingdoms is almost the furthest away you can possibly get to, the world politics and all
Yeah.
the stuff about Aegon's dream that should not factor into the show at all. But I do think that they're going to tie it into the other 2 shows. They're gonna have it probably with Daron. They're gonna have him dreaming about the others and the White Walkers,
Mm,
and I unfortunately think that when we get to the 3rd season, we're probably gonna see some stuff with Bloodraven. So, I think it's gonna be in there, at this point. I would be more surprised if it wasn't in there than if it was. I again, I kind of feel like we're in for like a season 1 of House of the Dragon where I expect the product's probably going to be good in this first season.
yeah.
Really, it should be really easy to adapt this source material. It's a really great story, but I do think there's probably going to be hiccups in there based upon them having to make their own stuff that's going on around the main story. What do you think, JC?
Yeah, I mean, I do feel that out of all the upcoming seasons of A Night of the Seven Kingdoms, which as of now there hasn't anything been officially greenlit for seasons 2 and 3, but it's kind of a 99% certainty that there's going to be
Yeah.
a seasons 2 and 3. I think out of the upcoming 3 seasons, I am the most confident on this first one. As we've discussed before, the season 1 of any kind of televised adaptation of George R. R. Martin's source material tends to be the most faithful when it comes to adaptation. And I'm not just talking about faithful as in a one-to-one, recreation of what happened in the books, but most faithful to the theming of the book, most faithful to what George R. R. Martin was going for. So given that, in addition to the fact that, the Hedge Knight is there's not a lot of there's no dragon on dragon action, there's no CGI, there's no bells and whistles. It's just a story of two characters going on an adventure, and it's a very heartfelt, wholesome adventure, and that's pretty much it. That's pretty much all it is for these first three novellas. So, given that, I think there's less opportunity for the producers to screw this up, which I know sounds negative, but that's the truth. As there's not as many opportunities here for the producers to get something completely just way off base that has nothing to do with the Hedge Knight. And I am feeling probably more confident. Well, I am feeling more confident going into season 1 of this show than I do going into season 3 of House of the Dragon.
Oh, definitely.
Yeah.
I mean, here's what I will say though. Also, they almost are less constricted in terms of some of the characters like in this show, right? Whereas Fire and Blood, like we know specifically the endpoints of a lot of our characters. We know the actions they take throughout their lives. A little different with the Knight of the Seven Kingdoms. Like, even think about a character. I love Makar, but we only have really two conversations that's the character actually has,
Yeah.
like that we actually see into his psychology. The rest of it is okay. We're learning it from other characters, talking about him, and so you take it that and you go, okay, the show does have some chances to build upon what those characters we think they could be in the book. For instance, Valar. So this is the eldest son of Baelor. We know almost nothing about Valar. Like he has one little moment with Dunk at the end of the first novella, and then we kind of see him, but that's almost it, right? So there's a lot that you could do with characters like that have almost no characterization within the novella because we're seeing everything through Dunk's perspective. It's not like a Fire and Blood where we're bouncing around, or like a Song by Some Fire where we're through multiple different POVs. There is opportunities to take characters that are heavily underdeveloped and take them to being really characterized. Something that House of the Dragon season 1 did a really great job with Viserys. Viserys had very little to work off of from Fire and Blood. They took him to being, I would say, one of the best characters between Game of Thrones and House of the Dragon.
Oh
But
yeah.
yeah, that's kind of where I see that we could see some of maybe the strengths and the weaknesses is those characters that aren't really characterized all that well in the novellas.
Yeah. And I don't know how involved George R.R. Martin is with the writing of this first season of The Night of the Seven Kingdoms. I'm gonna bet not very much. Like he's probably just
Be
a
my guess.
consultant on this. But I guess if the producers wanted to get more of an insight into Valar or Makar, they would ask George and be like, "Hey, George, like, based on what we read from the Hedge Knight novella, we kind of get that, Makar is he comes across as a guy who's rough around the edges, but he cares for his son, Egg. But we don't get much more of an insight into that. Can you help us with this?" I'm sure like he would tell them, based
Yeah.
on what he's come up in his head about what Makar is supposed to be, what he would like Makar to be on screen. But there is kind of a concern there that, well, the producers might have a quote unquote better idea of what they want to do with, Makar and Valar and some of these other characters that don't receive a lot of page time within the book, and they might incorporate some things that maybe aren't super ideal. But I think that is a worry that I'm not super concerned with because I do think that because this is such a small novella, it's a very quick read, it's a very easy read, and the main characters are Dunk and Egg. There is, still an opportunity to kind of get things a little iffy, but I think there's less of an opportunity to screw things up. And I'm again, it's easier for producers to get an insight into characters here in this written novella than it is for them to get it from Fire and Blood, which is just kind of a history retelling that doesn't really delve into the characters and has so many conflicting, sources of
Yeah.
information and testimonies. So, yeah. Before we move on, do you have anything else to add, Grease, about spoilers or anything to add?
Here's what I'll say. If they make Makar one note and don't give him any like personality, like how Stannis got dumbed down in Game of Thrones
Oh
until
yeah.
season 5, oh man, I will be upset. Just because Makar is basically Stannis but in Targaryen form. So yeah.
Yeah, yeah. I never got that. I need to reread that Hedge Knight novella again. I didn't get the Stannis vibes from Makar, but I could kind of see
Oh,
maybe
there's
that.
a lot of them.
Okay, kind of see maybe that's what he was going for.
JC, anyone that doesn't understand where I'm coming from, watch my Makar video. There's a lot of similarities. Think about it. Makar kills Baelor, his brother. Stannis kills his brother in Renly.
Mm,
Makar, always the kid that's getting overlooked. He's the youngest. Now it's different for Stannis because he's the middle kid, but he gets overlooked. He wants more, out of would you say? Like he wants more recognition for some of his
right.
deeds, right? Being major a factor in the first Blackfire Rebellion. Stannis, a lot of the things there with like say the Greyjoy Rebellion or even his stuff he was doing in Robert's Rebellion. Like there's a lot of parallels, even kind of in their demeanor where they're very strict. I'd say Stannis is a bit more reserved. Makar's a bit more, I would say, fiery.
Hmm.
But there's a lot of interesting parallels when you like really like step back and look at the two characters. But that's not this video. But yeah,
Yeah, that's true. I guess, the disgruntled brother who, well, one of them purposefully killed his brother, the other one accidentally killed his brother, as far as we
yeah.
know. But, the disgruntled brother who never got the recognition he wanted. Yeah, I got that. I got that. Cool. So moving on from that, Greece, there was a recent Deadline article where the producers of the House of the Dragon TV show, and more specifically Max, the streaming service here in the United States for the House of the Dragon TV show and Night of the Seven Kingdoms TV show that's coming up, they mentioned how this first season of A Night of the Seven Kingdoms is the most cost-effective, budget-friendly thing they've ever filmed regarding the A Song of Ice and Fire universe outside of those first couple of seasons for Game of Thrones. So given that, and given also their comments about how, because it's so much easier to film, they may film seasons 2 and 3 back to back, do you see a faster turnaround for A Night of the Seven Kingdoms than we do for House of the Dragon?
That's a very difficult question because the thing is, and the way I would be doing it if I was HBO is I would basically never want two different A Song of Ice and Fire projects to be coming out within the same year. And so right now I think they have the perfect like formula, right? So
Yeah.
1 year, so this year is going to be A Night of the Seven Kingdoms.
Yeah.
Next year it's going to be House of the Dragon season 3. Next year after that, how you make it A Night into the Seven Kingdoms season 2. You go back, you finish up House of the Dragon, then you finish out A Night of the Seven Kingdoms, and then you go into Aegon's Conquest. And, I heard rumors that they're kind of teasing a new show.
Oh gosh.
People maybe speculated possibly the Blackfire Rebellion or Robert's Rebellion. It's not going to be Robert's Rebellion. I'm going to say it right now. It's just not. I don't think George would greenlight the Robert's Rebellion show, but the Blackfire show, I think definitely. But I think right now it doesn't make sense to have two a year. I just feel like you're kind of overloading the audience. You're making it not as special, in my opinion. It's what Disney, I think Marvel, and also Star Wars have kind of come to the realization of
Yeah.
is like you put too much in there, you oversaturate it. People become less interested in the superhero genre. They become less interested in Star Wars, which used to be this, huge, big thing. Now it's kind of like, eh. But that kind of goes to the quality of those as well. But still, I think that where I think it'd be really good for them because it would help with the vision. If you're filming season 2 and season 3 back to back, you have a clear vision. You know what you're doing from one season to the next. I think that'd be great for the actual quality of the product, but I don't think it will change when we get to see the shows regardless.
Yeah. No, I'm of the same opinion that I think they've got a perfectly good cadence here in terms of their release schedule for the upcoming TV shows. One show a year, I think, is perfectly fine. Again, you mentioned it. The prime example that comes up is Disney, Star Wars, and the Marvel shows. They made the mistake of releasing as many of those shows as possible, within a short amount of time. And when we first got the first season of Mandalorian, it was something cool, something special. Nowadays, Skeleton Crew is out, and I don't even know what Marvel shows are out right now, but they're so far and plentiful. Not to mention, as you mentioned, the quality is also, well, I've heard good things from Skeleton Crew, but the quality of a lot of the shows recently has not been up to par with some of the earlier shows. So that the cadence for those shows is just so often so commonplace that people have kind of lost interest. It's like, oh, it's just another Marvel show, it's just another day. So in
Yep.
order to kind of keep that specialness factor, you want to keep having, still once a year to kind of keep them coming back, but it's still 1 year is still distant enough time for people to be like interested in wanting to know what happens next without it being so long of a time in between seasons that people forget what happens in the season prior. But yeah, so within that same article, they also mentioned that season 2 and 3 have, again, they haven't been officially greenlit, but they've been as greenlit as they could potentially be. And the right now, the common consensus within HBO and Warner Brothers is that this A Night of the Seven Kingdoms TV show is only going to go to 3 seasons. They have a 3 season arc in mind, and that is it. And that kind of puts into question George R.R. Martin's desire to want to get a fourth novella out for the Dunk and Egg series, which, as of this moment, it hasn't been officially confirmed. We first thought it was going to be the She-Wolves of Winterfell. Now it's looking like it's going to be the Village Hero, a different novella entirely. So given that, how do you think this potential news of Max only wanting, or not only wanting, but Max as of now only planning for 3 seasons plays into George R.R. Martin lighting a fire under his butt to get the Village Hero out within a decent amount of time?
I don't know, because regardless, it's okay. So the Village Hero, he releases it. Well, you're just gonna have to release another novella within the span of 2 years after. So like, it just becomes a point where I think that only going the first three makes sense if you
Yeah.
don't want to take any risks. You don't want to have to try and make up material
Yeah.
for this show. It makes sense because you're again, George has released, well, like, one actual book within the last, like, what, 10 years? Did Fire and Blood come out in, like, 2015 or something like that?
Like in terms of like full length books, yeah, like I mean, Dance with
Yeah.
Dragons 2011 and then Fire and Blood 2018, and that's it.
Oh, 2018. Yeah, okay, so, like, that's what I mean. So it's like, do we really expect that George all of a sudden, is gonna start working in a pace of being able to, bring out a novella within 2 years, while also still promising Winds of Winter, while also still promising Fire and Blood Part 2? Like, I just don't see it. And so I think it makes sense from at least a business side of things, a PR side of things, to just say, for now, we're only planning on 3. If by, again, because you'd have to think, if we're doing the 2-year model, season 2 comes out in 2027, then it finishes up in 2029. If George was to finish maybe the 4th novella somewhere, before, 2030, boy, that's wild to start thinking about. But maybe we see a 4th season, but I think the show is probably gonna be limited to 4 seasons at max,
Yeah.
unless something just radically changes and as George gets older, but I just don't see that happening. So, I think it's pretty realistic. What do you think, JC?
Yeah, I think as you mentioned, it's a smart business move on Max's part to just only have 3 seasons in mind as far as what they want to get done. You know, Grease and I don't have to tell you guys that when Game of Thrones kind of started I mean, they were already kind of going off book, during the latter parts of A Storm of Swords, and especially during A Feast for Crows and A Dance of Dragons, they were already kind of going off book. But, whenever there's not source material present and people kind of have to start making stuff up and trying to get into George R. R. Martin's head, well, things kind of get a little dicey. So in order to just kind of avoid that risk entirely of trying to, be like, okay, I'm not George R. R. Martin, but what would George R. R. Martin, write for a fourth novella? And then just kind of going off of these bullet points and notes that he might have for this upcoming novella. So given that, I think it's smart for them only to have 3 seasons. And as you said, Grease, given the cadence, that release schedule cadence that we have right now, 2025, season 1, then 2027, 2029, let's say 2028, when they're filming the 3rd season, George R. R. Martin is like, hey, I've also just released this new novella called The Village Hero. It's like, okay, it's still within a appropriate timeline where we can write and film this 4th season adaptation of The Village Hero. But if it doesn't happen by within a certain timeline, within the next few years, George still hasn't gotten anything new out, then they can safely kind of put A Night of the Seven Kingdoms to bed and be like, all right, appropriate ending for this show, season 3, second Blackfire Rebellion. I think that's a good enough stopping point, and so they move on from that, and I think that'd be okay.
Something else I think, is interesting is, would they even want to adapt the Village Hero? Because if you think about it, the way that I think a lot of people have discussed it, the rumors that have come out about what that could be about is gonna be very small scale, it appears. Even the title seems to indicate a very small scale story.
Yeah.
I think that it's going to be more reminiscent to the second novella than it will be the first or the third. So I wonder that, just based upon how the show is going, where it's like a lot of people have the third novella as their favorite, some have the first, nobody has the second really. If you do, let us know. Maybe they just think that, even if George gives them that and they're like, oh, this is nice, but I think we're going to leave it here where, it feels like the tension built up. It's a great place to end the novellas, that they just kind of leave it there. I don't know. I mean, greed's always a thing, so they could always just go for a fourth season, but
Oh, it's so alluring, Greece. They're gonna be like, oh, well, we could make more money if we.
they could go completely rogue. They could start being, oh yeah, this is where we bring in the White Walker stuff even more.
Oh gosh, I hope not, but oh, that might happen. Yeah, I mean, as you like, the first season is a great starting point for the Hedge Knight is a fantastic starting point. We get to know our characters, we get some action, we get some Targaryen lore. Second season it's more introspective, but it allows us a deeper insight into the characters of Dunk and Egg. And then the third book is a perfect climax for this series. The second Blackfire Rebellion, all the stuff with John the Fiddler and his dreams, and kind of everything coming to a head at White Walls. There, yes, yes. Oh, look at that beauty. Oh, the Blackfires.
We need more Blackfire stuff. After season 3, we just go right into the first Blackfire Rebellion.
And to your earlier point where you mentioned that there could be another show that's based on the Blackfires, the third season of A Night of the Seven Kingdoms could very much tie into that. And, it'd be like, all right, this is the end of the Night of the Seven Kingdoms, and perfect time because now we're starting this new Blackfire Rebellion show. And so, kind of going from there in this new TV show that's separate from Dunk and Egg. So, yeah, as you mentioned, even if we get a fourth novella, they might see that season 3 is just the perfect stopping point and be like, all right, yeah, I mean, this is great, but going from like the pinnacle of like, oh, everything's kind of coming to a head at White Walls, and then kind of going from there to be like, all right, it's another introspective journey. Like, there's a little bit of a disconnect here.
Yeah.
So,
It might also feel weird to end a show on that note, because like, if that's going to be your last season and it's not going to end on, again, we don't know what the novella is going to be, but just based on like all speculation, it would be really weird to end on like, how like the second novella ends. It would be weird to end a show in a similar type of manner to that. It's kind of how I look at it.
yeah. What if they add, and I mean, this hasn't been confirmed, but what if they add, like at the end of season 3, in order to just really wrap things up, they add a scene where like, oh, like Dunk runs back to Rohan Weber, and they have a good time, and it just kind of like flashes forward like years into the future, and then you see Brienne of Tarth. It just kind of
That would be interesting. I thought you were gonna go with Summerhall. I was like,
oh yes,
see,
yes, that's true.
Summerhall is interesting to me, but I don't know how you would do Summerhall, because you'd have to like skip so much into the future. I just feel like it'd be so confusing to a viewer if it's not like set up in its own like 2 episode special or something. Like,
Yeah.
'cause you'd have to establish, okay, how does Egg get on the throne? What leads to the situation in which Egg decides to do Summerhall? And then whatever their take is on Summerhall. So I don't know if that like even fits, A Night of the Seven Kingdoms, but I mean, it could be an ending point if they did a fourth season and they felt like we need something to really
Yeah.
slam this series home. But I don't know.
What they could do is, let's say they air all 3 seasons and they confirm that there's going to be a movie that's still within the same universe, the same Dunk and Egg universe, but that movie is going to be a flash forward of 50 years into the future where Dunk and Egg are at Summerhall, and hopefully, well, I don't know what's going to happen by then. George R.R. Martin might have reservations about putting Summerhall on screen because as of now, he has yet to officially write what happens. We don't have Fire and Blood Part 2 yet. We don't have Dunk and Egg novella Part 12 yet to know exactly what's going to happen there. So I might have reservations about being like, oh, I don't know if I want this on screen quite yet. But if they wanted to, and they can because George is powerless to stop them, but if they wanted to, they could definitely end A Night of the Seven Kingdoms with something of a flash forward, which probably not a proper season, but maybe like an hour and a half movie, 2-hour movie where we see the events there, and then you know, they die and it's like, all right, well, here's your ending for A Night of the Seven Kingdoms.
Yep.
But
Agreed.
yeah, anyway, Grease, do you have anything else to add to the conversation, good sir?
Not that I can think of. I think we hit all the major points we needed to.
Yeah, yeah. I think up to this point now, we're all just waiting for that trailer for the first season. As of now, nothing has been confirmed yet on when the first season of A Night of the Seven Kingdoms is coming out yet. George R.R. Martin has hinted that it's going to be fall. A couple of HBO executives have confirmed that it's going to be the same thing. So maybe we're going to have to wait a little bit longer for the show and also for the trailer. But you know, we're still looking forward to it. Grease, I know you and I are going to talk about some of the episodes as they come out. I know you got plans with Ricky as well, so people at home have a lot to look forward to for the show, and then also hearing us yap about the show.
Yes, yes. We've already done a lot of yapping about the show. We're still months out.
That's
So
true.
put that into perspective.
That's true. That's true. Cool. Well, guys, thank you so much for watching. Check out the Grease Goblins channel. I'll go ahead and link it down below at the Grease Goblins. He's a cool dude. He's got a lot of great stuff. He has that video on Makar comparing him to Stannis. Definitely go watch that. I know I will.
One of my favorite videos that I've ever made.
Oh, dude, I'm excited. I'm excited.
It was my top 5 videos that I made. I think I had like a list that I made for my top 5 videos for, I think it was 2023, and it was my favorite, or it was one of my favorites of that year.
Really? Okay.
Yep.
Cool. All right. Well, you guys will just have to check it out to see what Grease is talking about there. Go ahead and like all his videos. Subscribe here as well if you care to. And thank you once again, guys. Until next time, the Advocate.
Bye, guys.
Out. Bye, guys. Thank you, Grease. Bye.